ladies and gentlemen. You're watching India Tonight with me, Sumita, Kareer. I'm back with the show that deep dives into the biggest stories from the world of business, politics and geopolitics. And of course, tonight's big focus is on a geopolitical story that's only escalating. Well, the Iran-Israel conflict has escalated into its fifth day now, with both sides trading deadly missile strikes. Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, targeting Iran's nuclear facilities and military strikes, killing senior commanders and scientists. Iran retaliated with missile barrages on Tel Aviv and Haifa, causing significant damage. Over 224 Iranians and 24 Israelis have been killed, mostly civilians. G7 leaders are urging de-escalation, while US President Donald Trump is pushing for a nuclear deal to end the conflict. President Donald Trump, while speaking aboard the Air Force One after leaving the G7 summit early, said that he is not seeking a ceasefire on the ongoing Israel-Iran conflict, but a quote-unquote real end, demanding that Iran completely abandon its nuclear program. Donald Trump warned of severe consequences if Iran targets US troops and predicted decisive developments in the next few days. In fact, the White House has denied US's involvement in Israel's attacks. So the big questions that we are asking tonight: what's President Trump planning? How will he get Iran to abandon its nuclear program completely? Is there a diplomatic solution in sight? Let's put some of those questions and a few other important questions that we are asking tonight to our guest who's joining us on this live broadcast, Mr. Erik Snider, former Major, Israeli Army. He's joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Snider, for joining us here on ET. Now, I'm given to understand that there was just a rocket attack just a short while back. I do hope that you are safe and you're isolated and insulated, most importantly, from some of these attacks that have been happening.
Yes. First of all, thank you for your kind wishes. We are relatively safe as can be. One of the things that, in Israel, we've done a very good job in regard to the fact that we have a very strong air defense array, beginning with technologies like our Iron Dome, THAAD missiles as well, and other defense systems. In addition to that, since the first Gulf War in the 1990s, the building codes in Israel have required that any new residential building include a safe room or bomb shelter, so to speak, so that people can quickly and easily find shelter when attacks come in from various threats that Israel has faced around the region over the years. And so we know, quite frankly, that between the work of the Israeli Air Force with its allies in air defense, and then the home front being very well disciplined and having the ability to protect itself, we're seeing some tragic loss of life, but it could be much worse if the Iranians actually were able to achieve their goal.
Right. Absolutely, Mr. Snider. It's a relief to know that you've moved to a safe zone. But let's come back to the topic that we're discussing tonight. Essentially, President Donald Trump left the G7 summit immediately a couple of hours back, and he said that he wants a real end in what sounded like an ominous message. And he was asking people to leave Tehran. What does this indicate? What is it hinting at? How are you reading into his comments?
Well, I think that, we know that the United States is taking an active role in the defense of Israel against the Iranian attacks, which is very, very important for Israel. When we think about the fact that Iran is a country 10 times the size of Israel, it's clear that Israel needs and appreciates the help that it's receiving. In regard to what's happening in terms of the threats, you hear, it seems as if President Trump is at some point saying he wants an agreement. Sometimes he's saying that he thinks that he can wait a little bit. There's been speculation about possibly the U.S. joining in attacking Iran. I think it's still a little bit too early, but clearly what's happening is, it's making it harder for the Iranian regime to be able to make decisions, because it's clear that they don't understand what could be the potential American response to what they're doing, which puts them at a significant disadvantage. I think ultimately both sides, in regard to both the U.S. and Israel, and quite frankly, I think most of the Western world would like to see a nuclear-free Iran. And so, the question is, now that this has begun, what will be that end game that sort of delivers the results that, some people explicitly are saying that they want, and even some other countries around the world we know that they want it. They may not say it
Correct.
explicitly for other diplomatic concerns.
And we'll come to some of those points that you have raised, Mr. Snider. But, coming back to Donald Trump's comments when he says that, he wants something better than a ceasefire and he's looking for the end. Is this hinted at military action, given that there are reports that suggest that the United States is sending its military assets to the Middle East? And if that happens, then does it really mean a full-scale war in that region?
I think his comments are really should be interpreted at a different level. I think that what he's really talking about is, again, sort of, what sort of leverage and the starting point in which the Iranians are willing to actually have honest negotiations when it comes to a nuclear agreement. Because we know that, over the past few years, it's very difficult to trust the Iranians. When you look back over a couple decades ago, when they announced that they were going to pursue nuclear energy, they announced it to the world that it would be for civilian use only, which put the world community in a very difficult position when it came to understanding exactly what the intentions were. Now, there were those who were very skeptical of the Iranian regime, knowing that they are fundamentally radical and that they are hell-bent on destroying Israel. There were some that were a little bit more open to understanding what would be happening with Iran and their nuclear program. But over the years, it became clear that they are also pursuing a military ends to this as well. So when you're thinking about negotiating with the Iranians, what Israel is trying to do, and what I think that America is looking for, is putting Iran in a position where they actually have to negotiate in good faith and that they have really no other options but abandoning their nuclear program. But again, it's a very skeptical audience that the Iranians are talking to based upon previous history.
Yes. But Mr. Snider, how will the United States and Donald Trump make sure that that happens, that Iran comes to that negotiating table and it completely abandons its nuclear program, given the fact that Iran has previously defended its actions, stating that it's only that it's their right, uranium enrichment is in fact their right, and it's also targeted Israel and stated that their actions, that Israel's actions against Iran have been disproportionate.
Again, we need to, if we are willing to accept the basic fact that Iran is a bad actor, that they are a bad actor not just for Israel, but for the entire region and for the entire West, then we can take a different approach when it comes to how we're thinking about the messages that they're conveying. As I mentioned, we have to be very careful with what they're talking about and what they're willing to negotiate, because of the fact that we've seen that they have been dishonest in the past. So when it comes to what will happen with the United States, what could happen with the Iranians, it's really early to tell. And this is obviously, there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of pressure on leaders, both in Israel, the United States, as well as in the West, to understand what's going to be the best way to achieve that final goal. Israel military is doing a great job of destroying material, being able to strike at the means that they've had until now to produce and enrich uranium and bombs and missiles. They've been able to destroy or quite frankly kill many of the scientists that have been spending their days over years and years working on weapons to kill and destroy Israel. And so they've been able to hit at the knowledge as well. And they're also trying to strike at ability to build in the future. How will they be able to come back in a few months, in a couple of years, and rebuild more, be able to enrich uranium and build more weapon systems. And so the question is, what do you do to actually prevent them from having them abandon their nuclear program? And that's a difficult question to answer.
Right, but let me ask you again, Mr. Snider, that question. How much longer then this goes on, given the fact that, there is a loss of life that's happening on both the sides, and of course, there are fears of an escalation in this conflict, wherein, there could be a time when the United States gets involved and it, becomes balloons into a larger regional war, and that's not going to be good for anyone. So how much longer before the diplomatic solution is arrived at? And in your opinion, given the fact that, you have seen all of this pan out since decades and, of course, very many years, how do you really see this situation finally getting doused?
Well, you're asking a very difficult question that, quite honestly, if I had the answer, I would be considered probably a prophet. It's hard really to tell exactly where things are going to go and for how long it's going to escalate. Clearly, there's risk of further escalation. If the United States does begin to participate in proactive attacks upon Iran, we could see Iran and their proxies attacking U.S. sites, U.S. forces that are in the region.
Yes.
We have a sense that they don't want to do that right now because dragging the United States in would be a significant escalation and be severe risk for the entire regime. In terms of the military, what we're hearing from military and from political leaders is that it could take a few weeks. But typically, when you see such conflicts, you'll hear messages as such that this will take time, this will be a long campaign, and it will demand the patience and the discipline of the civilians and citizens to be able to support and survive this. And that really comes down to the fact that you don't know how long this can take. You want people to be patient and understand that when it comes to something like this, there aren't necessarily quick outs. And you also want to make, quite frankly, you don't want to put a time frame on these things because you don't want to tie your hands. If you're building such sorts of expectations, you'll be held to them. So what you see is that people say it'll take some time. We'll have to wait and see how much time. They're thinking weeks, if not months. And time will tell.
Right. Only time will tell. And how soon could that truce be arrived at, with U.S. mediation, without U.S. mediation? That remains to be seen. But most likely it's going to be with the mediation of the United States. But Mr. Snider, let me also ask you another question, given the fact that Donald Trump stated that he wants a real end, right? A real end could mean anything. How will he arrive at negotiations is something that remains to be seen. Whether the United States gets involved into this war, that also remains to be seen. But looking at things from an Iranian angle, could this also mean that Iran perhaps could be looking at targeting U.S. bases and military personnel in the Middle East?
I have a feeling that when it comes to how this will end and what that means for President Trump and the West, it really means a nuclear-free Iran. Ultimately, that's the end game. We've seen other countries that had pursuit of nuclear weapons or had aims to pursue a nuclear program that eventually they abandoned them because of different calculations. I ultimately feel that there's sort of a tough situation for the Iranian regime because on one hand, they feel that a nuclear program will ensure their survival. They're a very oppressive regime. They are unpopular at home. We know that. But if they have nuclear capabilities, it changes things. We see that pursuit in what's happened in North Korea. But at the same time, it may be that they're forced into a difficult decision where they will lose their regime if they continue to pursue this nuclear program. So ultimately, the ball will be in the court of the Iranians to decide exactly how they want to be able to get out of this. And these are difficult times for the regime for sure.
Yes. Right. And, pressure's also been building up from the side of the G7. That summit is still going on. We saw that statement on Iran and Israel tensions, where the leaders in that statement that was issued clearly stated that Iran needs to abandon its nuclear program and that it cannot continue. But let's also shift our focus to the statement of Israeli Defense Minister. He reportedly stated that Iran's supreme leader could face similar fate to Iraq's Saddam Hussein. Are you looking at a situation of regime change? And secondly, Mr. Snider, isn't Israel's response disproportionate, as some are saying?
No, it's not an issue of proportionality whatsoever, because, first of all, Israel is focused very hard on really targeting military and regime targets. They're not going after the civilians of Tehran or any other community within Iran. The message has been very clear when it comes to Israel's position on the Iranian population. If you look back before the regime change in 1979, Israel and Iran were allies. There's a large Persian population, a Persian Jew population that was in Iran. They're now in Israel. The fight is not with the Iranian people whatsoever. It's clearly with the regime. So proportionality is really not the situation, especially knowing that Iran is just blatantly firing rockets into population centers, which is a clear distinction between our targeted attacks in Iran. So I don't think that that's what's happening. In regard to the comments from the defense minister, actually, I think that he made some steps to walk those back recently. I think that what we see, especially in the Middle East, but we see it in politics around the world, is that sometimes our politicians and leaders are speaking a little bit to the base of their support without necessarily actually meaning what they're saying. In which case, it could be that was a situation here. But quite frankly, it's not. Again, it's in Israel's interest to make sure that the leadership of Iran is concerned about their own fate. Doesn't mean that they would take any steps, but it sure doesn't hurt to make them think about it twice.
Right. Right, Mr. Snider, let me just ask you final couple of questions before we let you go. I mean, many are saying that why is Israel pursuing such fierce military action and why not approach international agencies for fighting this? If you really think that, the uranium enrichment levels in Iran have gone beyond the permissible limit, why not approach international agencies?
Because we believe that they've been ineffective in their ability to enforce agreements that have been signed, and they have been sort of blind to a lot of the things that have been going on in Iran. As I mentioned, it starts with the confusion about Iran declaring decades ago that this is a civilian program, and for years they've been allowed to be able to develop nuclear capabilities without being held accountable. So Israel does support international oversight into what's going on, but at the same time, Israel is not going to be played to be a fool because of the fact that the international community may not be as effective as they should be when it comes to monitoring and controlling a nuclear program within Iran.
Right. One final question, Mr. Snider. Do you really see Iran give up nukes entirely? That's been the communication that's coming in from Israel, from Donald Trump, and of course from the G7. Do you really see that situation happening?
I think that there's a better chance now than there has been in the past. That's definitely for sure. Whether or not it will happen, I don't know. But two positive things have certainly come from this. Number one is, regardless of what their position is, Israel is now in a position where it has been able to significantly push back their capabilities. If not months, certainly years, from being able to achieve a nuclear weapon that can eliminate Israel. So from that standpoint, it's already a significant achievement. Second of all, it's forcing the international community to come to terms and to come to terms with what's happening in Iran in order to be able to resolve it, which I think is very, very important. In terms of overall time, we'll have to wait and see. When we think about Iran, there are really two different sort of sand hourglasses that have been sort of ticking down. One is the one that looks and says, how much time is left before they actually have nuclear capabilities? And the other one is actually regime change. Not that Israel is trying to spur regime change, but we see year over year, we see that there's more and more unrest within the Iranian community, within the population, because we see that they are very tired of being under this fanatic repressive regime. And we see the protests, whether it be the women without the hijabs, other things that are going on within Iran. We know that there is a strong opposition, and eventually they will probably overthrow this government because the government is fanatical, corrupt, and just a horrible, horrible, horrible regime.
Right, Mr. Snider, of course, so there is discontent also, as you say, within Iran as well. And we'll have to see whether a diplomatic solution can be arrived at sooner rather than later, according to what Donald Trump stated, that he wants an end to this. What does that really mean? How much longer this conflict goes on? We do hope that a solution is arrived at, peace is reached at, and of course Iran can give up its nuclear ambitions. On that note, thank you very much, sir, for joining us here and sharing your thoughts with us here on ET Now. We do hope that there is resolution to this ongoing conflict and tensions that are brewing in the Middle East.
I appreciate your time. It was a pleasure. Thank you.